Ah, hey. So, every year, twice a year, over on our Patreon, we run this little contest where our patrons can enter for a chance to win, and if they win, then we fly out to their shop for a week and we build a project together. You might remember the last one we did at the beginning of the year when we flew out to Texas. And this time, we got a little surprised when we drew the name out of the hat. Well, we weren't going to Texas. We were going a little bit farther away. Georgia. Nope, that was last year. Germany. That's right, and we always said that we'll go wherever, the name says we gotta go. So, without any further ado, let's go to Germany. On an airplane. I'm not gonna run the whole way there. Isn't it crazy that I can get in my car in Oregon, drive to the airport, climb inside this magical metal box, and then get out in Germany a few hours later? What will they think of next? I've never been to Germany before. This should be pretty interesting, especially since Craig's driving and there is no speed limit on the Autobahn. Now, let's meet our winner.
Hi, my name is Christian Hock and I'm from Aschaffenburg. So Aschaffenburg is located in the Lower Franconia area of Bavaria in Germany. It's dating back to the year 900, so it's really old. It has a lot of bars and restaurants and parks and even a big castle, and overall there are up to 70,000 people here. So it's not that small, but not that big. It's right about the perfect size. Back in the days, my grandfather was a professional woodworker and I was always around in his shop. So if you see way there in the back, this was the sign of the professional wood workshop of my grandpa. So that was the first time I got in contact with wood and woodworking. And then I think 20 years later, I needed something to work as a hobby beside my IT job I'm doing. So that was the reason why I started woodworking. So about 3 years ago I started looking YouTube videos about woodworking, and I came across the channel of Bourbon, Moth Woodworking, and I really liked the way he's doing his videos, the kind of jokes he's making and just the builds he's doing. So yeah, I started watching the videos and got into the woodworking and learned a lot about these videos. Then that one day I recognized you can sign up for Patreon and you have the chance to win that. And I thought it would be a good idea to do so and to show Jason and Craig not only Germany but also everything around here, and have a great week, and also build a nice piece of furniture for my house. My wife and my 2 little daughters live in a small house with a small garden and a small workshop, and we love it around here. It's always nice, the weather is always perfect, mostly. No, this was a partly open place for parties. So
For potties?
yeah, exactly. So
Like where you go to the bathroom?
No, a party, a fest.
Oh,
For
a party.
a party. Oh, not a potty. Okay.
Not a potty.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So
For potties?
exactly. So this wall wasn't there.
Okay.
I had to build this wall and.
Oh, so it was just like a covered patio kind of.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you built the wall.
A
and put the
California
window-
room, or what you ever want to
Oh,
call it.
okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I said we don't need this, but I need a shop. So this was the only place which I can do this. So, hi there, come with me in my shop. So let's start over here. That's the green wall. Yeah, everything I need to do what I do. And that's where I store all my lumber, so for daily use. And here I do have my small little sliding table saw, which is quite good. Here I do have my good old drilling press, and that's where I store all my pencils and thingies. And that's my workbench, which is super big. That's my jointer planer combination, and my bandsaw and my new dust extraction system and a 3D printer, which I sometimes use to print adapters for the dust extraction, and some more drawers to get everything in control. And here I do have a router table and a miter saw connected to another dust collector, and more drawers, and the famous fastener cabinet, which is filled with fasteners I rarely use because I don't want to use fasteners. Basically it. There's some power and some air and some sauce. Ta-da!
All right, let's build. Now, the project Chris wanted to build was a replacement for this piece. This was an older piece they bought when they were younger, and they wanted to give it a little update. So we're essentially going to build a similar size cabin with a more modern design. Chris is going to use this to store whiskey glasses and whiskey, so I knew this was right up my alley. Now, one thing I liked about Chris immediately was he already had this piece entirely designed before I even got here. So that means I got more time to drink this delicious cappuccino that his wife Nicole brought me. After we talked through his design concept and got a plan of action for the week, it was time to go get the wood. Now, normally when we come to these patron builds, we go out and buy the wood together. But another thing I like about Chris is he already purchased all the materials before we even got here. I mean, this guy is making our life too easy. He just couldn't fit it all at his house, so he had the wood stored safely in his storage container. And when I say storage container, I mean a literal container, like off of a container ship. We did get a little distracted looking at his awesome motorcycles that he also keeps in the storage container, but we eventually found the wood. For this project, we're going to build the entire thing out of some awesome European white oak that he had his friend mill down for him. Now, he was telling me that his friend's sawmill had basically two settings, really thick and then super duper thick. And because he wasn't exactly sure what thicknesses we needed, he got mostly the super duper thick, which means we've got a lot of milling in our future. So we loaded up all the wood into the back of his trailer and we drove it back to his house.
Do you want some hand shoes?
No, hand shoes? Oh, because is that the actual German word?
Yeah,
Handschuh?
exactly. Yeah, because it's a shoe for your hand.
But that's the word is handshoe?
Yeah, Handschuh.
Handschuh.
Handschuh, which translates to handshoe.
Handschuh. No.
No, you want to have the splinters?
Yeah. I want to know what it's like to have a German splinter.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
only ever had American splinters.
They're hurt the same way, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. After politely denying his offer of a Handschuh for my fingies, we unloaded all the wood into his garage because, as you can tell, there's not a lot of working space in the actual shop. Then I decided to just roughly sketch out the overall design onto a piece of paper because although we had it on his computer, he was using some weird 3D software that I didn't know how to use, and I figured a piece of paper would work just fine to get all of our measurements. By this time, apparently it was lunch, so we walked around the corner to a butcher shop that was awesome, got a little bit of lunch, and then it was back to the shop to start milling up some boards. Now these boards came straight off of the sawmill. Chris did take the time to rip off the roughest side that had all the bark on it, but they were still nowhere near square. So it was going to take a lot of milling just to get the boards to a point that we could actually work with them. So I gave Chris a pair of isotunes to protect his hearing, and we got to work slicing and dicing that European white oak. It was also around this time that I realized we're going to have to use these funny looking tape measures with all these weird numbers on them again. Now, although Chris's shop is small, he really did a fantastic job at utilizing space. This joiner planer combo, for example. It's great because it's two tools in once, and he's got this handy little wheeling system that he can scoot it out and use it, and then push it back up against the wall. So we started out on the planer section, running all of our rough cut boards through to get them smooth on both sides. We had gotten approximately 2 boards milled when...
Hi guys, bring me some coffee.
Oh my goodness! I wrote
That's
you
with
not to
Sarah.
bring coffee.
Oh really?
Yeah,
no, come
on.
I want
We're
it.
from Oregon. We'll always drink coffee.
Yes,
I'm so sorry.
absolutely.
Thank you for bringing coffee.
I don't know if you want.
Ew.
Okay, I just thought it's like coffee time.
Amazing. You've been working too hard.
Thanks,
I have to
Nicole.
drink some water.
I'm going to say a lot of really nice things about Chris throughout the course of this video because he's an awesome guy. But he is nothing compared to his amazing wife, Nicole, who cooked for us and kept us stocked on coffee constantly throughout this entire build. So huge thanks to her. Pretty soon we had most of our boards milled up. And we had produced a lot of sawdust because we were going from basically 8-quarter white oak down to about 6-quarter. So we had to remove a lot of material to get there. Once we had all the boards milled as good as we could get them with a nice straight edge on one side, it was time to rip them down to width over on the table saw. Okay, so just so that I'm clear on what we have to do, we're going to rip these down. We're going to start on this table at an angle. We're going to dip down through the blade. We're going to run it through the blade like this. Once it gets off of that table, then we got to go up at an angle this way to get into here to clear the blade. Safety first. Safety first. This has got to be one of my favorite parts of these Patreon builds is working in other people's shops and seeing how they get tasks done. Chris's shop is long and skinny, which means he just doesn't have enough room for a good infeed and outfeed on his table saw. But does he let that stop him? Of course not. He still zip zap zoops those boards down like nobody's business. Or as Chris would say,
Zip sap soup.
now, do I recommend cutting boards this way for safety reasons? Well, if you can avoid it, maybe find another way. But hey, it got the job done, and pretty soon we had all of our boards ripped to the correct width. Now it was time to glue them up. And because our milling process, well, it left a little something to be desired, I decided it was probably a good idea to put some dominoes in to help with the alignment. So we plopped all of our boards down on Chris's huge work table, marked them out for all the dominoes, and drilled out all of our mortises with Chris's domino joiner.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Now, in America, I like to use my patented glue spreader, but Chris had this weird rubber brush thing. And if you ask me, it just doesn't work nearly as good as the old finger schmear. Finger schmear? Is that a German word? Now, we did this a lot, for a lot of different panels, so I'm going to spare you watching each individual one, but let me just tell you, we glued a bunch of boards together, and we kept gluing boards together until we basically had all the pieces glued up that we needed for the cabinet, some of which were pretty long. And again, there's not a lot of working space in Chris's shop, so we laid some scrap boards across his miter saw station, stretching to his planer joiner, and we created this little work table where we could glue up our longer panels. And because space was limited, we decided to glue up both of our long panels just in one giant glue up without glue in that middle seam, so this is actually 2 pieces. The hardest part of the whole glue up was just getting out of the shop once we were done, because we got ourselves in some precarious situations. It was actually a lot harder for Chris because he had to crawl on the floor and brave all that squeeze out just to get out the door. But we managed to escape and everything was glued up. Now we just had to let these sit until the morning and the glue was all dry.
No touchy touchy.
That evening, Nicole made us a delicious dinner of goulash with red cabbage, a nice bottle of red wine, and we all sat around and got to know each other a little better. Then we sat on the couch while Chris and Nicole showed us their remodel pictures from when they first bought their house. I mean, that's like next level friendship stuff right there. And we finished the night off in Chris's shop drinking a nice bottle of beer. After we moved our makeshift workbench, of course. And then the next day, I fully expected to do a little bit more woodworking, but Chris had other plans. He took us to a local clothing store. I was very confused, and he introduced us to this guy.
Yeah, one of the guys working here, and he's always doing such a great job of customizing and building my suits. So I thought
Nice.
we should come here and get some lederhosen.
Wait, did he just say lederhosen? Oh boy. Here we go. When we first booked this trip, we didn't realize that it was going to be right in the middle of German Oktoberfest. But Chris, being the exceptionally thoughtful and nice man he is, got us train tickets to Munich so we could experience the festivities. So we hopped on the train at 7 a.m. in the morning and started the 2.5-hour journey. And we also started drinking at 8:24 in the morning. By 9:30, we were in the beer tents of Munich drinking our second beer. And they were starting to get bigger. But hey, I'm from the Pacific Northwest. We make strong beer. I've been training for this. At approximately 10:05, we were in the second tent of the day having our third beer. A quick skip to the next tent, and by 11 o'clock we were on to beer number 4. Then I had to loosen my lederhosen because they were starting to get a little bit tight, and we were on to the 4th tent for beer number 5. Now, I don't want you to think we're a bunch of drunks and we just sat around and drank all day, although that is the German way. We also ate some beef, and then it was on to the 5th tent for beer number 6. And we were actually pretty tired after this tent, so we stayed there and had beer number 7. But then we decided to take a break and eat some more food, in this case sausage. And then I'm not sure whose idea it was, but somebody had the brilliant thought that with all this beer in our belly, we should go ride a roller coaster. After the roller coaster, I decided to pass on the German fish sticks and move on to beer number 8. And I gotta tell you, at this point, I was starting to feel it. Just a wee little bit. Prost. Luckily for Craig and Christian, I could have kept going. That was our final beer, and we headed back to the train station by way of rickshaw. And then, while we waited for our train, Christian told us a nice story.
So every time we were going to my grandpa, who had his shop in the basement of his house. When we came there, and there was a bloodline going from the workshop all the way up to the first floor to his living room, we knew he again cut one of his fingers off. So in his lifetime, he cut off all of his 10 fingers. But he was able to get buried with all of his 10 fingers.
So he kept his fingers.
He kept his fingers. So the
Suture? So
So yeah, exactly. They were able to put him back to his hand every time, and he didn't miss one finger till his death, which is great.
I love the fall. The air is crisp, the leaves are starting to change, the apples are ripe, and it's a great time to make some last-minute, lasting memories with your family. It's also a great time to think about your future. And that's why I love Policy Genius, because they take the hassle of trying to find the right life insurance policy and they make it incredibly simple. All you got to do is go to policygenius.com, fill out a few little things, and they'll find the right policy for you at the right budget. If you don't believe me, just check this out. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. That's probably why they have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot, because they really are the smarter way to buy life insurance. So you might be wondering, well, that's all great, but where do I go? What do I do? How do I sign up? Well, that part's really simple. You just do this. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/bourbonmoth or click the link in the description to get multiple life insurance quotes for free and see how much you can save. Huge thanks to Policy Genius for sponsoring this video. Now, back to Germany. It was day 3, and for some reason, I was just a bit tired. We got out to the shop early, though, and started taking all of our pieces out of clamps. And then Christian did something really silly. He started sanding, and I was like, Chris, you don't have to do that. That's what Craig's for. So we stood around and rested while Craig did all the sanding. Just like back at home. Next, it was time to start cutting our pieces to the correct size so that we could hook the outer carcass of our cabinet together. Chris's design calls for a waterfalled top, or 2 mitered edges that create the box, and then there'll be a lower butt-jointed piece at the bottom. So we used his track saw to cut the 45-degree angles for our mitered corners. Once we did that to one side, well, you guessed it, we lifted the next side in place and did the exact same thing.
Sip, sap, soup.
But we weren't done there. Then we grabbed another piece, and this time it was for the top, so we had to cut a miter on both sides. And then finally we could cut all of our pieces to the correct length. I always like to cut the mitered side first before cutting the piece to length, because that way if you mess up the miter, you still got some room at the bottom to work with. So, it's a lot easier. Another design element that Chris wanted to add was a huge chamfer or back bevel around the entire front opening of the cabinet. Lucky for us, he had a giant chamfering bit. So we chalked that up in his router, and then he tried to help me with the dust collection, but as you can see, it wasn't really doing a whole lot. And unfortunately, I forgot to bring a mask with me to Germany, so I am literally holding my breath this entire time because I don't want to suck in all that oak dust. And there was a lot of it in that small shop. But this chamfering bit did a great job. I mean, I almost did black out because I was holding my breath so long, but that's neither here nor there. The end result is what matters. After each pass with the router, I'd set it on the floor and then quickly run outside to get some much needed oxygen. Once we had that chamfer detail added to all of our carcass pieces, we used the domino joiner to add mortises to hook those miters together. This is the best way to do giant miters like this because it really keeps them from sliding around and makes clamping them up much, much easier. Now, Chris had to go make a phone call for work, so while he was doing that, me and Craig kept forging ahead and did a little dry fit on these mitered corners. And I gotta say, all in all, they actually fit pretty good. Pretty soon, Chris was back in the shop, and it was time to cut down all of our pieces that would create the internal structure of our cabinet. I also took this time to show Chris how to make a shelf in the middle of a box using the domino joiner. It's pretty slick, and if you want more detail on how to do that, we actually have a domino joiner video on the channel that'll walk you through the entire process. With all of our carcass pieces cut to the right size and mortised out for the dominoes and chamfered and mitered, it was finally time to assemble our cabinet carcass. The only problem is Chris's shop wasn't big enough to assemble it inside the shop. So we moved all the pieces over to his garage space and started setting up to do our glue up. Now, giant glue ups like this can be a little bit stressful, so you want to make them as easy as possible on yourself. I kept some of the cutoffs from our miter joints and I used them as clamping cauls, just sticking them on with some double-sided tape. We were just about ready to glue this entire thing together when we realized it was going to be too tall and run into the ceiling if we kept it on the sawhorses. A mistake that I'm very glad we figured out before we started gluing the entire thing together. So we removed the sawhorses, just set our bottom panel on some blocks of wood to get it up off the floor, and started smearing on glue. At some point you can plan and plan, but you just gotta start gluing things together and hope for the best. Now, I just did a giant time lapse of this entire process because, well, it was stressful and hard and every bit as horrible as you would imagine, and I just really didn't feel like showing you all that in detail. The fact of the matter is, we got the thing glued up, and it was time for day 4. The morning of day 4, we met Chris at Bauhaus, which is basically like German Home Depot. And I just want to say, German Home Depot is awesome. They got a coffee shop in there so you can get breakfast and coffee and then go do all your shopping. Why haven't they brought that to America yet? We were here because we needed to buy a piece of plywood for the back panel of our cabinet. While Chris bought the plywood, I looked at all the different options for toilet seats that are available in Germany. Again, America, get your stuff together. Then it was back to Chris's house to work on our panel. Now, in America, I would have just bought a piece of oak veneered plywood for the back panel. But Chris said that was really hard to come by or very expensive in Germany, so we decided to make our own with some birch plywood, some contact cement, and an oak veneer. We originally started out with this spray contact cement because we thought it would be easier, but it came out in giant glops and definitely was not going to work. So we sent Chris back to the store to get the roll-on type of contact cement, and while he was doing that, we started unclamping the cabinet and working on cleaning up these miters, which, to be honest, really weren't that bad. A little glue and a little screwdriver action on those corners, and they looked as good as could be. Chris eventually showed back up with the right type of contact cement. I inhaled a few of the odors and quickly passed out. After applying the contact cement to our birch plywood, it was time to apply it to our oak veneer that Chris bought online. Now, the veneer isn't cheap either, so we wanted to use as little of the veneer as possible so that Chris could use the rest for other projects. So we cut it down to a piece that was just big enough for the upper portion of our cabinet. And Craig and Chris tried to apply contact cement to the back while fighting the elements. It was a little windy that day, but they got it done, no harm, no foul. And then we just stuck it to the birch plywood the same way that you would do laminate. We put some wood strips down so we could control the contact to the birch plywood, and then just very carefully we removed our sticks and smoothed the entire thing out by hand. I mean, that's basically all we did. I don't know why I left so much of this clip in the video. Maybe I just thought it was very satisfying, so I'll just shut up and let you watch. Okay, that's enough of that. We had already cut our plywood to size, but in order for it to fit in the back of our cabinet, we needed to rabbet out a groove around the perimeter of the entire carcass. Now, we purposely set all of our shelves and internal divider in the amount that our rabbet was going to be so the panel would sit right on top of them. So we chalked up a rabbeting bit in Chris's Festool router, and we just
Zip, zap, soup.
the entire edge of that cabinet. Now, the round rabbeting bit did leave a rounded profile in the corners, so we did have to go back with a chisel and do a little bit of cleanup, but it was not too bad at all. And then we grabbed our panel to test to see if it would fit. Now, I'm going to tell you it fit on the very first try because there's no way you can prove me wrong. Unless you call Chris and ask him, and he might tell you it took 3 or 4 tries of trimming it down a little bit by a little bit, but we eventually got it to fit on the first try. Then I went around with a countersink bit, pre-drilled some holes, and Chris followed behind and screwed the panel in place. Then we lifted up our cabinet, which was actually starting to look like something, with that beautiful veneered oak panel in the back, and the lower section's going to be all drawers, so it'll cover up that raw birch ply. And with that, the carcass of our cabinet was pretty much complete. Now it was time to start working on all the internal components. So we carried the cabinet back into Chris's garage for safekeeping, and then we headed to the shop to start working on our shelves and all of our drawers. Which meant we had to mill up some more wood, because initially we only milled up enough for the actual cabinet carcass. So we zipped, we zapped, we zooped, and all in all it was pretty
easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Once we had all the wood milled up, we made our shelves. But to install these shelves, we had to lift the cabinet into the correct orientation, and it was raining outside, so we wanted to do it in the garage. But we realized we couldn't do it in the garage with the garage door shut because the ceiling was too low to lift it up. So we had to shut ourselves inside the garage with the door shut, lift the entire thing up, and then once it was lifted up, we could open back up the garage door, and it was in the correct orientation, and we could start working on the shelves. After gluing them all together, Chris shaped the front with a nice little chamfering plane because he wanted to feel like a real woodworker, and I danced around like a moron with these little shelf brackets I made out of some scrap pieces of white oak. I made some quick little setup blocks to set all the brackets at the right height, and then after cutting our shelf down to the right length, I brought the first one in and plopped it in place. Then I used those same setup blocks to install the second shelf bracket, and Chris had cut our second shelf to size, and he set that one in place. Next, it was time to start working on our drawer boxes, but we needed Baltic birch. So while Chris called around to try and find some, I balanced this giant plaything on my face. Eventually, Chris managed to track down some Baltic birch. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that in Germany, you can get Baltic birch in 4.5 by 9 foot sheets? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. Yet again, another thing that America needs to do to step up their game. 5 by 5 sheets. Give me a break. It was the morning of day 5, and we were in the final push to get as much done on this cabinet as we could before me and Craig had to head back to America. For starters, I needed to put my ISO tunes in because Chris was making all sorts of noise. That's better. While Chris worked on milling up some more oak for our drawer faces, I worked on installing these Bloom undermount drawer slides, which was a little tricky because they were, again, in metric, and I'm used to working in inches. And if you think they're the same thing in the United States, they're not, because the instructions are in metric, and that's what was confusing. So doing my best metric conversion in my brain, I figured out what size we needed to make our drawer boxes to fit these 35 millimeter drawer slides. Or is it 35 centimeters? I always get the two confused, and I know one's smaller than the other one, and I just want to go home. Anywho, while me and Craig broke down that giant sheet of birch ply, Chris decided to resaw some of the oak boards so that he didn't have to do so much milling. Once we had the birch ply broken down, we brought the pieces into the shop and we cut them all to the right size and shape on Chris's table saw. It was a great day to be working inside because outside, Germany was doing its best to make us less homesick and make it feel a lot more like Oregon. But while the rain pitter-pattered outside, I was cutting pieces down to size for our drawer boxes, and Chris was still milling away that white oak. Pretty soon, I had all the pieces for our drawer boxes cut to size, and it was time to glue up our panels for our drawer faces. I was trying my best to smear the glue the way they do it in Germany, but I'm not sure I was doing it right. We're going to have 6 drawers in total on the bottom portion of the cabinet. So we glued up 3 long panels that will cut down the middle so that we can have continuous grain across the front of the drawers. I used Chris's router table to add a groove to all of my drawer box pieces to hold our bottom panel, and then it was time for lunch. What's for lunch, you might ask? Well, Nicole made us schnitzel. I think that's what it's called. I mean, it's like pork and it's fried up all yummy and delicious, and she made vegetables and all sorts of good stuff to go with it. Have I mentioned that Nicole's like the coolest person on the planet and she took really good care of us, and I'm going to weigh 10 pounds more than I came here because of her? Because if I haven't mentioned that yet, I just want to say, Nicole, you're awesome and a fantastic cook. After lunch, I took a nap while Chris filled all the voids in the front of our drawer faces with this cool glue gun. Now, I've actually seen these before in the States, and I've been meaning to get one for a long time. I've just never done it. But after Chris used his, I gotta say, it's a pretty quick and easy way to fill knot holes. You just squirt the stuff in there and then use this little block plane to trim it off. You gotta do it a couple times to fill all the holes, but still, pretty slick. Then it was time to assemble all of our drawer boxes. Now, originally we were actually going to make all the drawer boxes out of solid oak too, but we just ran out of time. That's why we switched to Baltic birch, and pocket holes are a great way to hook these boxes together because once you put the drawer face on, you don't see the pocket holes and they're pretty darn strong. So with all of our drawer boxes made, our orange bloom clips attached to the bottom, it was time to go install them in our cabinet. So we carried all the boxes back over to Chris's garage and click, click, clack, or some other appropriate sound effect, we put all the drawer boxes in the cabinet carcass. And it looked something like this. And as always, if you want more detail on exactly how we make drawer boxes, I've got like 3 videos on my channel at this point on just how we do it. So go find one of those. With our drawer boxes built and installed, we could finally start cutting our drawer faces down to the right size and get them installed. We just used some setup blocks to set our first drawer at the right height, clamped it in place, countersunk some holes through the drawer box on the inside, screwed the drawer face to the drawer box, and then just worked our way up, doing exactly the same thing until we reached the top. Now, Chris purchased some drawer hardware online. It's all identical, so I decided to throw together this little drawer hardware jig just out of scrap pieces of plywood so that we could get all of our holes drilled for our hardware in exactly the same spot on every single drawer face. And I got all those holes drilled just as the sun was setting on day 5. It was day 6 and our final day in Germany to work on this cabinet. Now at this point you might be thinking, you're not gonna finish this thing. And you're right. I'm telling you right now, we didn't get it completely finished, but we did get it completely built. And I'll share what Chris has to do after we leave at the end of the video. But this morning's task was to construct the cabinet doors that will be on the upper portion of the cabinet. Now these doors are going to have glass in them, and that's one of the things that Chris is going to have to do after we leave is get the glass cut to the right size. For now, we're just building the frames, which are pretty simple. 4 pieces of white oak hooked together with dominoes. Now you might be asking, why didn't you do a traditional mortise and tenon like a shaker style door frame? Well, when I insert glass into a frame like this, I don't like to do the shaker style because normally you cut a groove on the entire inside of the frame to hold your panel. But we don't want the panel to be permanently held in there because it's glass, and if the glass breaks, you want to be able to take it out. So instead, we just glue up an entire frame with dominoes and then we'll add a rabbet to the back to hold the glass. Got it? After our frame was done, we marked out and drilled for our cabinet door hinges, installed those, and then we just had to take the frame over to the cabinet, shim it into the correct location, and screw our hinges to the inside of the carcass. Just like that. It's only missing one thing. The glass. I mean, it's kind of easy to get into the cabinet at this point, so you just got to pretend there's glass right there. After installing our other cabinet door, I set Chris to work installing the hardware he purchased online, and while he did that, I sat back, relaxed, and had myself a German glass of water. At least that's what I'm calling it because I didn't see anybody drink water the entire time we were here. Rubio Monocoat Germany was so nice in sending Chris these bottles that he's going to use to finish the entire piece after we leave. With everything installed and built on this cabinet, we decided to carry it outside, put the entire thing together, and get a few beauty shots. So we set the thing up in Chris's driveway. No, we didn't get this project completely finished. There's still a lot of sanding, finishing, glass to be installed, but we did pretty good for 6 days. We had so much fun. Chris and his family are absolutely amazing. I know it sounds cheesy, but one of the hardest parts of these builds is saying goodbye at the end. I mean, you spend 5 or 6 days together, around each other constantly, learning about each other's lives, building with each other, and then you have to say goodbye. But the nice thing about these trips are the memories that are made. Memories that will not soon be forgotten. This is the 5th one of these trips we have taken, and each one has been amazing for its own unique reasons. Is it about the piece? No, it's about the people. And I can't wait to see where we go next. Who knows? It just might be to your shop. You just have to sign up for our Patreon at the link down in the video description.
So, das war eine verrückte Woche hier in Deutschland. Jetzt kann ich schon richtig gut Deutsch sprechen. Ich habe auch ganz viel von der Kultur hier gelernt und muss euch sagen, dass dieses System mit Zentimetern, Millimetern und Metern so viel mehr Sinn macht als das, was wir hier drüben benutzen. So, vielen Dank, dass ihr uns zugeschaut habt.
Okidoki!